Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a closer look at Great Expectations.
Mm.
You sent in a review, and it had some pretty strong opinions on this book, and that's great. We're going to be using those opinions to kind of unpack this wild plot,
Yeah.
maybe see if we can figure out why it might be more entertaining than you think, even if you're not like a Dickens fan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what's really interesting here is that your review is already a form of literary criticism in itself.
Right.
It's not just like a passive summary. It's like an active, conversation,
Huh.
or reaction to the story itself.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, it jumps right into the action.
Yeah.
Like right away, that opening scene in the graveyard, I mean, it's so vivid. Little Pip, all alone, looking at his parents' tombstones, which is kind of bleak,
Yeah.
to say the least, right? And then suddenly, out of nowhere, boom, this terrifying escaped convict appears.
Yeah, classic Dickens right there. He had such a knack for blending that dark humor with these genuinely like scary moments,
Yeah.
and it immediately grabs your attention. Like what's going to happen next?
Totally. And then there's Mrs. Joe, Pip's sister. And your review did not hold back, let me tell you. Called her an aggressive shrew. And honestly, it's not an exaggeration. I mean, she's not just strict, she's physically abusive. Remember, she's got that cane that she calls Tickler. It's unsettling. It makes you realize how, like, commonplace violence was in Pip's world.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a stark reminder of the harsh realities of Victorian society, especially for children, right?
Yeah.
Dickens wasn't afraid to portray those difficult truths, and that adds like a whole layer of psychological depth to Pip's character.
Okay, then we have this almost comical scene on Christmas Day where Pip's totally convinced the police are coming to arrest him because he stole some food, remember? But it turns out they're after the escaped convict.
Oh, that's prime dramatic irony right there. We know the truth as readers, but Pip's totally clueless. It creates this this almost comedic tension. But at the same time, it emphasizes how naive he is at this point in the story. I mean, if you look at the actual text, Dickens describes Pip as like trembling from head to foot, like as he expects to be caught for stealing, completely unaware of this larger drama unfolding around him.
Speaking of naive, your review mentions Pip's stupidity a few times. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Well, stupidity might be a bit harsh, but he is young and he definitely makes some impulsive decisions, often driven by fear and this longing for a better life. So maybe it's less about stupidity and more about his innocence, which, as the story progresses, we see that slowly disappear as he encounters the complicated adult world.
Right, right. And speaking of complicated, we got to talk about Miss Havisham. I mean, her mansion is like something straight out of a Gothic novel. The king frozen in time, stopped cobwebs everywhere, a wedding dress that's probably seen better days. I mean, the imagery is just so powerful.
Yeah, it really is. It's like you're stepping into a visual representation of Miss Havisham's broken heart, like literally trapped in this state of suspended trauma. And her manipulation of Pip and Estella, who we'll get to next, really reflects her bitterness and her desire for revenge. I mean, the stopped clocks, for example, they're not just a quirky detail. They symbolize how her life, literally stopped emotionally the moment she was jilted at the altar. It emphasizes the destructive nature of unprocessed pain.
Totally. Now on to Estella, who the review describes as beautiful but cruel. And she just seems to delight in tormenting Pip. I mean, it makes you wonder what's going through her head.
Well, Miss Havisham's influence is definitely a big factor. I mean, she was raised to be cold and calculating, essentially trained to weaponize her beauty against men. It speaks to this cycle of pain that, unfortunately, Miss Havisham perpetuates.
Yeah. And then Pip's life takes this massive turn when he receives his mysterious fortune and he moves to London to become a gentleman. He really seems to embrace this new identity, doesn't he?
Right. He does. And this transformation is a pivotal point in the story. Pip's sudden wealth and status fuel his arrogance, and he starts to look down on his humble beginnings. It really sets the stage for his eventual downfall. Think about the scene where he returns to his village after becoming a gentleman. He's like ashamed of Joe's simple ways, and even tries to hide his true origins. Dickens is using this scene to highlight the corrupting power of social ambition and the dangers of forgetting your roots.
Yeah. The review doesn't exactly paint Pip in a very flattering light during this period. Uses some pretty colorful language to describe his behavior.
It's true. Pip's actions during this time reveal his internal struggles with ambition and class and identity. He becomes consumed by wealth and status. He loses sight of the genuine love and support he has in Joe. This resonates with a broader theme that runs throughout the entire book. The idea that outward appearances can be deceiving, that true worth is found in character and not social standing. And then comes the bombshell. The revelation about Pip's benefactor, it's not Miss Havisham like he believes, but Magwitch, the convict from that very first scene in the graveyard. The review describes Pitt's reaction as horrified and disgusted, which, I mean, isn't all that surprising given, like, the societal norms of the time.
Yeah, it's definitely a shock. And I can't help but feel a little sorry for Pip, you know? He built this whole fantasy around his great expectations, and it just all comes crumbling down.
Absolutely. I mean, his reaction is completely understandable. He's a product of his environment where social class is everything. But this revelation really forces him to confront his own prejudices, reevaluate his definition of what it means to be a good person. It's a powerful moment that challenges the reader to examine their own biases as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's Magwitch. I mean, the review kind of glosses over it, but he shows incredible generosity and loyalty to Pip, even after being treated so poorly.
Yeah.
It's a stark contrast to the hypocrisy we see among some of those upper-class characters.
Exactly. Dickens was a master at exploring social class and turning the idea of respectability on its head. Magwitch, despite his criminal past, displays a depth of compassion that surpasses many of the supposedly respectable figures in Pip's life.
It's true, and the connections are mind-blowing. Magwitch turns out to be Estella's father, and his former partner in crime, Compayson, is the one who left Miss Havisham at the altar all those years ago. It's like this intricate web tying everyone's fates together.
Oh, Dickens was brilliant at weaving those complex plots. And it's not just for dramatic effect. He uses those connections to reveal the lasting impact of past choices, how they ripple through generations. It adds another layer of depth to the story and to the characters themselves.
And one of the things I found really powerful was Miss Havisham's attempted redemption. Even though it ends rather tragically, she realizes the harm she's caused, begs Pip for forgiveness, and ultimately dies in a fire.
It's definitely a complex and tragic end. You could interpret her death as a symbolic release from the bitterness that has consumed her for so long. The fire becomes this cleansing element. But it's also a reminder that some wounds, especially those inflicted on others, are just incredibly difficult to heal.
For sure. Okay, now about Orlick. The review seems to find his attempt to murder Pip completely out of the blue. But I think it adds to the sense of danger that always seems to lurk in Pip's world.
I agree with you. Orlick represents the simmering resentment that often exists within a rigid class system. He feels wronged by Pip and others, and his actions are driven by envy and a desire for revenge. His character highlights the fact that societal problems can manifest in unpredictable and often violent ways.
Definitely. And we also can't forget Magwitch's attempted escape and that tragic confrontation with Compayson, leading to Magwitch's capture and eventual death sentence. I mean, it's heartbreaking, especially since Pip has finally come to understand and appreciate him.
It's a truly devastating turn of events, and it underscores the unforgiving nature of the justice system at the time. Even though Magwitch has tried to change his life, he is ultimately punished for his past transgressions. It reinforces the novel's exploration of social mobility, or lack thereof, and the lasting consequences of the choices that we make.
That's so true. Amidst all this darkness, though, there's Joe. He's just a constant source of loyalty and support. He takes care of Pip when he's ill, even after being treated terribly. It's such a testament to his character.
Joe embodies the true meaning of unconditional love and forgiveness. He represents like a moral compass for Pip, reminding him and us as readers of the importance of humility and compassion and integrity. It's those qualities Dickens seems to argue that ultimately define a good life, not wealth or social status.
Yeah. It feels like Pip has to lose everything. His fortune, his social standing, to finally see what truly matters. He realizes how much he messed up and the depth of Joe's love for him.
Loss and suffering can be powerful catalysts for self-discovery. Pip's illness and Joe's unwavering care force him to confront his own flaws and recognize the true meaning of love and loyalty. It's a turning point in his journey towards self-acceptance and understanding.
Yeah. And then just when you think things are going to be okay, Joe marries Biddy. What a twist. I guess Pip wasn't the only one with feelings for her.
That's another unexpected turn of events that adds to Pip's growth. He learns to let go of his own romantic illusions and accept the happiness of others, even if it means letting go of his own desires. This speaks to a level of maturity that we see develop in Pip throughout the story.
It does. Finally, after years abroad, Pip encounters Estella again. She's widowed, and the story ends with them walking off together hand in hand. It kind of leaves the future open to interpretation.
This ending is incredibly ambiguous. Some might see it as like a hopeful possibility for reconciliation and change for both Pip and Estella. Others might view it as a continuation of their complicated relationship, leaving the reader to wonder if they can truly escape the shadows of their past. It's a fitting ending for a novel that explores the complexities of human relationships and the ever-evolving nature of identity.
It's interesting because the review called Great Expectations,
Mm.
one of the most irritating novels ever written. But I actually found myself, really invested in Pip's journey, even when he wasn't like the most likable guy.
Yeah, I think that speaks to Dickens' talent as a writer, creating these characters that are flawed, right? But also deeply human. They're capable of great kindness, but also tremendous selfishness. And I think, we recognize parts of ourselves in their struggles, even when we might judge their choices.
Oh, and the reviewer definitely had some judgments. But they also brought up these like unexpected moments of humor that I really appreciated. Yeah. It's not all doom and gloom. There's this like wit and cleverness woven throughout the story, even when dealing with some pretty serious themes.
Yeah, right. Dickens' ability to balance those elements, the tragedy and comedy, the social critique, and the genuine emotion, it's a big part of why his work, I think, continues to resonate with readers today. He captures the full spectrum of human experience, showing us that even in difficult times, there's always room for laughter, for hope, and even redemption.
Absolutely. So after exploring all these twists and turns, what are your biggest takeaways from Great Expectations? What do you think Dickens was trying to say about the pursuit of happiness?
That's a great question. For me, it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of societal expectations, how they can lead to disappointment and disillusionment. Pip's journey really highlights the idea that true happiness isn't found in wealth or social status, but in, genuine human connection, compassion, and self-acceptance.
Yeah, that's a powerful message. And even though the reviewer might not agree, I think Great Expectations is a story that stays with you long after you finish reading it. It makes you reflect on your own ambitions, your relationships, and what truly matters in life.
It's considered a classic for a reason. And like any great work of literature, there are so many layers to uncover, different interpretations to explore. That's what makes it so rewarding to revisit, to discuss, and to share with others.
Exactly. Who knows? Maybe our cynical reviewer will even come around to appreciating it someday.
Anything is possible. I mean, as Dickens shows us, even the most hardened hearts can change.
Well, on that note, I think we've successfully navigated this deep dive into Great Expectations. Thank you so much for your insightful analysis, and thank you, our listeners, for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. And for anyone who's curious, I highly recommend checking out the novel or, one of the many film adaptations. It's a story that continues to resonate and inspire readers generation after generation.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning. And remember, sometimes our greatest expectations can lead to our greatest disappointments. It's the unexpected journeys that often teach us the most valuable lessons.